All righty. Welcome to a special meeting on Wednesday, February 23rd. Before we get started, ask the city clerk that if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz.
Here.
Commissioner Longbine.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Okay. And for those not in the room, Commissioner Hoppick is attending via Zoom. Right. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to take the mayor's prerogative and take the easy way out and ask the city manager to guide us through the
Certainly, happy to do
afternoon's
so.
proceedings.
Yes, as a little bit of an overview, I think you recall that there was ARPA hearings, the American Rescue Plan Act hearings that were conducted at the state level. We had a lot of good collaboration on the part of many community entities, the county, the city, the school district, the chamber, the EDO, Kansas Wesleyan University, K-State, Salina, and we sent a delegation to Kansas City to give testimony there. It was very well received. We got a lot of feedback that it was noticeable that Salina had a unified plan and a unified approach, and that left a good impression. Since that time, there's been progress as it relates to the state's allocation to some of the funds that they receive. In particular, the topic today is what they're calling base funds, and they've allocated $100 million of base funds. They're taking applications from various entities, not just government, but not-for-profits, private entities are all eligible to apply. Each entity can submit 3 applications, and so and the deadline is February 28th, which is next Monday. It's been kind of progressing rapidly. There's continues to be a lot of collaboration. Jacob Wood, the deputy city manager, and Lauren Driscoll have taken the lead on behalf of our organization in kind of pulling together the review of that, as well as providing to you some options in terms of applications to submit. So we've got a couple things today. We do have an executive session on the agenda as the first item. Need to have a conversation with you about some project-specific trade secrets that are eligible for executive session. I'll give you a little bit of context on as it relates to one topic, and then we can return into open session, and Mr. Wood will take the lead in presenting the base grant applications and discussion.
Just in case someone wants to look it up while we're in executive session, do you happen to know what BASE stands for? Or is it written in here?
It is building a stronger economy.
Okay, thank you. That's right. It is in here. Yep. I forgot that quickly. Thank you. All right, in that case, I believe there is a motion for an executive session.
And my best guess on time would be 25 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss the subject of a specific economic development based upon the need to discuss data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships pursuant to KSA 75-4319B4. The open meeting will resume in this room at 2:25 or 2:30.
2:30. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to recess into executive session to discuss financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, et cetera. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. All right. And Commissioner Hoppick will be joining us.
Yes, by phone.
By
in the
phone,
executive
okay.
session.
That passes 5-0. We are in executive session until 2:30.
Okay.
Do I need to bring us back into session again?
It might not hurt.
Okay. We will open business back up in a regular session. It's now 2:32, and we'll proceed to item 3.2.
Item 3.2, base grant application discussion.
I'll turn it over to City Manager Jacob Wood to walk you through the base grant program and then the specifics of our local submissions.
Okay, Mayor and Commissioners, Jacob Wood, Deputy City Manager. Just kind of give you a little bit of highlights of the BASE program. This is kind of the first allocation that the state made with their ARPA funds. ARPA funds, that's the American Rescue Plan Act money. We got some, the county got some, lots of local entities got some. The state also got a big pool, about $1.6 billion that they, last year they allocated a little bit of it, a couple, $500 million went directly to shore up the unemployment insurance trust fund, and then there's a list of 10 or 15 smaller projects where they allocated those funds. One of those funds was the BASE grant, and this is money that's really intended to be kind of an injection into the economy as quickly as possible. So there's parameters of this grant. They would like it to be spent quickly, so they want your project to be started in 6 months time frame, with it expended within a year. Parameters of the grant, there's lots of different entities that can apply for this, so you can apply as a local government, as a private entity, so it's really kind of wide open as far as the applications are concerned. There is some requirements, so entities can only submit 3 grants, so you'll see on the list that we're looking at, we're anticipating that we're going to submit 3. It requires a 25% match. The maximum amount that you can actually apply for is $25 million, and then the total pool for the whole state of Kansas is $100 million. So with that, I'll kind of talk about a few of the projects that we've looked at, and you guys have had an overview of some of these projects in the last couple of weeks. Lauren Driscoll provided a presentation in study session just 2 or 3 weeks ago about some of these projects, and then there's some that you probably haven't heard a whole lot about, and we'll go over those. So the first project that I'm going to talk about is the Drever Housing Development. That's a $315 million project. We are going to request $65 million as an ask for this, and we've had a lot of conversations with Lieutenant Governor and our local delegation, and while the $25 million is the max for this grant, we are going to go ahead and submit the project as a whole. That was kind of the way that they recommended that we do it, and we'll see how that comes out. For the local match on that, the city has already set aside $1 million from our ARPA funds that would be used. And then Salina County has also committed to $1 million to that project as well. So the rest of the local match will be from the developer. The developer is going to put some cash in. And then they're also requesting that local businesses submit or invest in this project as well. So it's a pretty big, it's a pretty diverse set of capital stack that we would need to make this project move, but that's kind of how that lays out. I'm going to pull up a picture here. I've got to do 14 things, so bear with me.
Commissioner Hoppick, you should know you're the picture. Now.
While he's doing that, oh, there, he's got it.
So this is just, I'm just going to give a real broad overview of the projects. So this is the Drever project. This is the property around Menards. There would be 1,300 new units here, multifamily units, cottage homes, some 200 active adult 55-plus apartments, a YMCA, childcare would all happen in this area. And then the other site is where the Ambassador is on West Crawford. There's 3 properties there. There's a hotel, the Value Inn, that would be remodeled into studio apartments or junior studio apartments. The Ambassador Hotel would be just demolished, and then new apartments would go in. So this is just kind of a broad overview of what this looks like on both of those areas.
And I would add that, our conversations with our representatives have been the entirety of this project. They have a good understanding of Salina's housing need in response to our economic development successes and projects. They have a good understanding of this vision. So part of the strategy of submitting this as one request is to maintain that continuity of here's Salina's need. They can certainly fund us less than the full ask, but that then prompts a conversation locally about, okay, here's the funding that's been allocated. How do we utilize that? And it also potentially keeps the conversation going about the need for additional funds from other sources. So strategically, rather than break it up and have them say, well, we awarded you a grant and we funded one project, we're trying to keep this together as a project as they consider it.
So that's the Drever Housing Project. That's kind of the down and dirty. The ask here is for you to give us authorization to submit the grant application and commit to the $1 million. So that's what we would need on the Drever project. I'm going to move right into homes, and then we can go through I guess I'll stop here if you have questions about the Drever project and the ask there, and we can do that right now.
Just to refresh my recollection, how many units total will that be?
1,800.
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on to the next project, which is Holmes Road. So this is a 3-mile section of Holmes Road from Country Club Road to Magnolia. This would be water, sewer, and a street, new improved street there. This would free up approximately 1,200 acres for housing development that could happen along both sides of Holmes Road. The cost of this project is $10.8 million. The grant request would be $8.1 million, and then our local match would be $2.7 million. And we do have, it's about 50-50 split. It's about $5 million for water and sewer and $5 million for streets. So we could take that $2.7 million out of funds that we already have in the water and sewer reserve fund, or we could debt finance it. And then we also have just annual funds that we use for streets that we could make that work as well with debt financing. So we do have some cash that's available for that type of project. And that's the Holmes project, really not too much else to that. I'd entertain any questions on that.
Yeah, the Holmes project. I thought that was initially just from Crawford to Magnolia, but you're all the way to Country Club.
Yes, and I'll tell you.
How much of that is county property in there? Quite a bit, isn't it?
Well, quite a bit is county. Quite a bit of Holmes Road is county. Actually, most of it is in the county right now.
Yeah,
I think a small section here and a few sections down here.
This corridor is identified in our comprehensive plan as our future growth area for for the foreseeable future as it relates to residential. So while it's not in the city limits at the moment, it's anticipated that that's where our growth would occur, and we'd annex it in as needed.
Yeah, and if you can see my cursor over here, so this property has been platted, and they're in the process of putting streets in. This property, most of it's been platted, and they're putting streets in, but you'll see that there's kind of a line. They're building to about right here. And the reason they're doing that is because once they build past this kind of midway line, they have to have some kind of entryway onto Holmes. And in order to do that, Holmes needs to be upgraded. So if the cost of development just really skyrockets if they have to put in those streets and water and sewer on Holmes Road. So if we were able to put that in, this whole area would be able to be open for development. We have a developer that just recently purchased this property that could develop. We have interest here and here. There's interest on both sides of the street, really all the way. I don't know that we've had a lot of interest on this side yet, but you know, there's no infrastructure, so we wouldn't have had interest. I mean, there really isn't much benefit to them at this point.
Yeah, we have set up plans for benefit districts to pay for that development of Holmes Road. Can that money still be recouped, for lack of a better term? And even though a base grant, if it was successful, would have put the infrastructure in, can we still take money and pay down that debt with it?
Well, as we put the perimeter road policy together, we tried to take that into account. But one of the things that's kind of stymied development along Holmes Road in particular is the benefit district is on both sides of the road while property ownership's on one side. And so we've never been able to get the planners to align with property owners to, their focus is more inward benefit districts for improvements within their subdivision. And we've never gotten, the timing to work such that there was a benefit district to be formed to address Holmes Road. So in light of kind of housing prices and the challenges we're facing at this point, the thinking would be this would be backbone infrastructure that would be installed to kind of spur development out there. In fact, I think in the housing study update, they referred to it as pioneer infrastructure. Get that main line out there to then facilitate the development off of that spine. So it may be possible, procedurally, it may be possible to put a benefit district together, but as we're trying to address housing price points and affordability and expedite development, this approach probably addresses those concerns.
But that is a real part of putting in housing. I mean, house is no good without water, sewer, and a street
Certainly.
to get there. I mean, it's-
I think our lack of a way to address this previously is what's contributed to these properties remaining undeveloped. And if we take the benefit district approach, which we certainly can do, I don't know that the pace will change, and the price points are going to be the same or higher. So this is kind of in direct response to our sense of urgency about affordable housing and the timing of housing.
And if a grant is approved, there's still a point at which down the road we can still say, on second thought,
Correct.
we don't want to do this, we're not going to do it. And
There is, and like I mentioned before, if it's not fully funded, there's partial funding, then we'd have to take some phased approach, and it may be that you focus on that intersection in Crawford and Holmes and get backbone infrastructure there, and you don't necessarily do the entire corridor as one project at one time.
okay. You can go ahead, Jacob. We'll let you keep your momentum going.
Okay, any other questions about Holmes Road? I will move on to the.
Would it involve annexing all that property?
Eventually, either as we do the road improvement or at a minimum, when the development occurs along that roadway, and then that would be the city's road to maintain as
But until then, it would be
development.
shared with the county, the road?
Well, I think at the point that we improve it, then the expectation would be that we're maintaining that. In its current state, it might be county maintenance until development occurs out there, but at the point that we improve it, the expectation would be the city's to maintain.
As far as annexing, though, is there a major disadvantage to the city annexing the property?
Not that I can think of. It'd make
And
the
I
problem-
don't ask that with any answer already in my mind. I'm just
Right.
asking for that.
We'd have to assign zoning. It could start out as ag zoning until it developed. So at the point that we either see development there that adjoins the road, we're going to be expected to take that road in for city maintenance. And at the point that we invest and improve that road, the county's going to expect us to take it as ours. So I don't know, I can't think of any downside, assuming that we get the grant and we're able to proceed with this project. We could either annex it at the outset, or we could annex it as development occurs. But road maintenance would be ours regardless.
Okay.
Mayor Davis, I have one question,
Yes, sir.
and I don't know, I've got several questions about several things, but maybe I'll jump in here on the Holmes Road. If we were to receive just a portion of our grant request, are we submitting a total plan? Because I believe the total 10.8 includes curb and gutter, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
So if we received less, would we be able to do something more like what we have in Markley Road and not do curb and gutter?
Yeah, I think that we could. That'd be a conversation we'd have to take up with them. But our initial look at it is the need for waterline looping and sewer connections probably extends further. And if we were to phase anything, it probably would be the road work, whether it was curb and gutter, or whether it was shortening up the section that was paved altogether and focusing on a more focused area, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I was just thinking based on the traffic that'll carry for quite a few years, that, the curb and gutter might be, a little more than we need for that area for quite a few years, so.
Yeah, we do have the interim street standard and then the full street standard. So
Right,
what you're describing is essentially the interim street standard.
right. That's all I had on that. Thank you.
Okay, I will move on to the next project. So this is the Aeroplanes development, and you've heard a little bit about this in the last couple of weeks. They came forward with some action not too long ago. So the Drever project is happening over here, and then just to the south and west is Aeroplanes. This would be the first phase of the project, which would be 112 units, and the total project there, the cost is $33 million. $4.5 million would be the grant request. There would be no local match from us. The developer would be the matching funds on that, and basically that would pay for the infrastructure. So this grant, the eligibility for housing, really, it's really just acquisition, infrastructure, kind of anything up to vertical construction is eligible for the cost. So that's the part of the project that this would cover. And the representatives of Aeroplanes are here if you want some more details. I don't have a whole lot more than that on this one. We do have some kind of rough site layouts at this point, but they're going through the platting process right now. So this would be the third project. Be happy to try and answer any questions, or their representatives could as well.
Jake, could you repeat again what portion of this project the base grant application is for?
So it's really for infrastructure, so anything up until vertical construction. So you could use it for engineering, you could use it for the acquisition, you could use it for all the dirt work, all of that sort of thing, but it can't be used for the actual, as they come out of the ground, construction.
Okay, thank you.
So this kind of begs the question of Aeroplanes has entered the conversation in place of two items that we reported to you, or Lauren reported to you previously. I'm sure you recall the other two items that we identified as priorities or as potential projects. One of those was improvements to Magnolia Road from I-135 to Centennial. We've had conversations about pursuing KDOT funding. They have a process. They'll get funding in August and should get additional funding above kind of their normal allocation thanks to ARPA and the new funds that are available. So we've put together a strategy to be prepared to submit to KDOT for those improvements on Magnolia in lieu of applying for the base grant. And then the other project was a developer called Flaherty and Collins that had proposed an apartment complex on the east side of Ohio, essentially across from Jerry Ivy Park, 200 units, and by the time we ran the numbers, their cost per unit was pretty substantial, and we felt like these were a little bit more strategic use of the fund. So with Aeroplanes being where they're at in terms of their progress and their initial commitment to investment, we felt like the three that we were bringing forward to you were housing intensive and trying to be the most strategic in terms of asking for funds to address our housing issues.
So now the apartments were considered less likely to address our need than
Just less
10-year
cost effective when we ran the numbers of what their project projections were in terms of cost, and then their ask for grant funds to be applied to the project. I'll let Ms. Driscoll speak to that more specifically.
Well, and I want to be very conscious to note that Flaherty and Collins is an excellent developer. They brought us a good project and product. Just timing-wise, as far as what was really meeting the ideal price points, the time that we needed, and really kind of, if we were going to go get these monies, the biggest bang for our buck. And when we looked at the number of units we could get and the impact we could have, 200 units is great. And we had a good conversation with them this last week, kind of saying, here's where we're strategizing. This isn't the ideal one we're putting forward, but are you still interested in Salina? And so their answer is yes. And I think it's important that we kind of keep those relationships with developers going, because even if we get the Drever project and we get aeroplanes and things like that, we still need people looking at Salina, looking to keep building as we keep growing. It's just really the type of product they had most readily available that they thought would work at this time. The economic gap for them was very significant. And as you can see with Drever, you can get a financial break when you start to get into having a lot of units, right? We also saw that with Perry Reed. They already have 2-3 projects in town. So as a property manager, which is a big part of multifamily development, you start to see some economy of scale when you've already got people here. For Flaherty Collins, they'd have to set up a whole new team here just for those 200 units, and that gap gets bigger in the overall scheme of things. I'm hopeful as we grow and our demand shifts, and I'm hoping as the economy with both labor and materials starts to maybe even out again, that we're still on their radar and they could potentially be a great developer someday and be able to bring their product here. But as far as kind of, if we're going to go ask for money, how do we get the biggest bang for our buck? We just saw other projects getting us more for that ask.
What would the cost of the Magnolia be in the donut hole?
That was essentially 10 million as well.
Yes.
You may recall, that's a mile segment compared to the Holmes Road being 3 miles, but there were challenges with the configuration of the road, the steep side ditches, the improvements that have to be made on that alignment.
Which is the very reason I would love to, I'm not going to call it free money, but 75% financing. I mean, that project, it's got to be done. I mean, you got to connect the airport with the rest of the town.
Right.
Because the way Magnolia is now, it's obviously it's not going to carry all that extra traffic.
And admittedly, we're having to kind of try to be strategic. I don't want to make any promises about the KDOT process, but we felt like there's an opportunity out there to address Magnolia separate and distinct from this application, this process.
Less costly than what the base grant?
I would say no
range?
more costly than the base grant approach.
Because if I was
And
going
it'd
to
be a
put money on
cost sharing
either
as well.
project, I'd certainly want to put it on Magnolia before I put it on Holmes.
Well, and I think Magnolia also has railroad components and walkability components that KDOT has funding specifically identified for. And I know, Mayor Davis, you brought up when we talked about the Magnolia project with Perry Reed, you were concerned about accessibility and walkability on that road. And the project, as we have been proposed, would, I shouldn't say bid, as we have proposed and designed, would have a 10-foot bike hike path on one side and then sidewalk on the other. So it would definitely have a connectability piece.
And going through the KDOT approach, what time, is that like a 2 to 3 to 4 year timeline, or?
Their process would be this fall in terms of their funding and getting into their budget cycle. So that's our intent, is to pursue it at that point.
I guess that's probably the word I was, how fast does their budget cycle work? It's not for, assuming, when you hear a fancy term like that, it's not for the next year necessarily.
No, I think it would. We would have an answer yet this year, and then be headed into next year.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing is, so all of these grants have to be appropriate use of American Rescue Plan Fund money. And so the state has kind of put that on the application, the applicant, to say this is how this money meets the intent of the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan, it's really hard to get streets out of it. Water and sewer is automatically applicable. Streets, I think Holmes Road, I think there's some ways we can make that work, but this doesn't necessarily have there's a small portion that has a connection to housing, but it doesn't necessarily have a specific connection to any kind of, one specific economic development project. So it's kind of hard to fit this into the American Rescue Plan pot. It's easier to fit it into KDOT pot and maybe some of the other federal funds that are out there.
It does connect our largest economic driver in the county.
It does,
the
but
airport project.
American Rescue Plan is really not. So base grant is really, it's focused on economic development, but the American Rescue Plan is not necessarily focused that much on economic development. There are other things, and it's streets in particular are kind of hard to make fit into that. that hole, if that makes sense. I know it's confusing. There's 700 pages worth of guidance that's come out from the Treasury, and it's changed 3 times. So it's very complex.
Recently is a couple days ago.
Right. So we feel like we've got an opportunity somewhere else. Go ahead.
What about bridges?
Bridges, absolutely. There's federal, in a different federal pot, there is money for bridges that we are certainly going to go after.
Yeah, and we'll continue to monitor the state and federal funds and eligibility and continue to make applications, but we have to kind of tailor our applications to the criteria of the grant at hand.
Okay. So I will move on to the next project, which is a Northside Industrial Park wastewater and rail realignment. So this is the area that we're talking about, the Northside Industrial Park. So this is North Street, so you have Lakewood, Lake over here and Park, and then you have North Street, and I think Marymount is about right here. So that's kind of the general area that we're talking about. And so what this project would do, it would move a rail spur. So there's a rail spur that goes through this property that really is used just for storage of cars, train cars, and there's been some work with the railroad to try and remove that rail spur and to move it somewhere else, and that's about a $3.7 million project, and that kind of opens the area up to the north and connects it with the industrial park. It's really kind of hard to get there you can't see it on this map, but it's hard to get there from Marymount or from anywhere to the north, so that would open this property up. And then the other part of the project that's really the big part is this. You can see that there's a force sewer main that goes through this property. This is a 30-inch main. It's a really old alignment that kind of followed the river in the past. But as you can see, it juts right through some Great Plains property, and then this is Repco, who was here just a couple of weeks ago. So moving this line would allow the property here. You really can't build anything on top of that or add on to any of these properties because of that line. So what we would do is we would realign that with the road and connect it kind of like that. So I don't think we have a full design of that portion just yet, but the total project there is $5.2 million. We would be requesting $3.9 million. And then the local match would be $1.3 million. And if the city was to come up with that, we would do that with some of our American Rescue Plan funds or fund balances that we have. And we certainly could figure out a way to fund that if we were awarded this grant. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Just for anyone looking without divulging any information, this would be done on the assumption that we have some economic development potential for this region.
Yeah, absolutely. We would do it with the intent that this would open this property up to future development and expansion of some of the businesses in the area.
The combination of city and private funds, do we have any indication how much of a private match?
We do not at the moment. If we got the grant award, similar to what we talked about before, we're not necessarily obligated to take it. That would be the point that we have to negotiate some cost sharing among the benefiting parties and kind of treat it like an economic development prospect going forward. But the timing of the base grant application and the deadline kind of brought this to a head a little bit earlier than we might normally process it otherwise.
I think it'd be reasonable to expect a 50-50 split.
Yeah, I can't speak for the other benefiting parties, but the sewer line in particular, we have some benefit to, replacing that old line and improving that alignment, but then we'd have to work out the details of the remainder. And it's very likely that it would become an economic development prospect, and we'd start to have conversations about investment, job creation, and factor all that in.
So this application would not be submitted by the city of Salina. It would be submitted by SCEDO. What we would be asking for approval for a commitment is the local cash match today. And then approval to write a letter of support. And the last project on the list is university housing. This is a consortium with Kansas State University Salina. They've got a whole new name. I don't know what it is, so I'll just say K-State Salina. And then Kansas Wesleyan. Both of those universities are in need of housing and have a plan to expand their housing. And so they are requesting a $16 million project. Their grant request is $11 million, and they would have all their own local match. And this isn't something we would have to support financially. Salina County this morning had a special meeting where they discussed this, and they are going to submit that application. What we would ask is that we get approval to write a letter of support for that project. So that would be, I think the total is around 200 to 300 new on-campus housing units. Kansas Wesleyan has a plan to do micro, kind of small, tiny homes. There'll be 1,000 square foot homes with 5 bedrooms in them that will allow some of their students to live on campus. And then there's a dorm planned at K-State Salina.
So that would be 2 separate projects?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so for that, we would just be asking approval for support. And so that is everything for me. I'll throw up the full list here again on the screen, and then happy to take these one at a time or entertain any questions. We'll move forward as the commission wishes.
Well, I won't speak for the other 4, but I think we do them one at a time. You may not leave until Thursday. Because and all the applications are, well, of course, they're separate applications, but they all have to be in by next Monday.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then when we talk about the endorsement of support, that is a portion of the application. You're limited on how many letters of support that can be submitted, but Lauren and Jacob are coordinating with others to try to strategically meet that number limit, but have correspondence that's signed by multiple parties, so we can continue to demonstrate kind of that community consensus and collaboration. So all those conversations are ongoing, and your authorization of an endorsement then would essentially authorize the mayor to go ahead and sign on our behalf on those communications attached to those applications.
And we are committing to matching funds without necessarily specifying where all of those matching funds are coming from.
Well,
We have a rough idea, but, I mean,
right.
those sources aren't
But
etched in
actually,
concrete
Debbie
right now.
Pack, finance director, is here, and I think she's prepared to at least reassure you that there are those funds available. As Mr. Wood reported, we have previously set aside the $1 million as part of your strategic planning of allocation of ARPA funds. We had set aside $1 million for new housing construction and $1 million for infill development. So those funds have already been segregated, and then we've confirmed the availability of the other funds in our
Ms.
reserve
Pack,
balance.
come on down and make me feel better about this. Yeah.
Understandably so.
Debbie Pack, Director of Finance. So as Jacob said and Mike have said, we have previously kind of set aside some funding for housing under ARPA, both infill and new development. Some of the other things that we talked about was, as we've seen some of the growth in our fund balance in the general fund, we're currently seeing about a $6 million excess fund balance in the general fund as of 12/31. We also have a reserve fund in the water and wastewater capital fund. We've talked about that a little bit and how we've set some of that aside. It has about a $3 million fund balance in there for some of these utility projects. Some of the other funds that we're seeing increases in because of sales tax this year, the sales tax capital fund, it has about $2 million available in it. So as you can see, our fund balances are looking very strong for the end of 2021. So we do feel like any of these matches that we could certainly provide that additional funding for. The other option we always have with matching funds is debt financing. Rates are still fairly low. If that was a choice we wanted to make, we could certainly do that. And then we have some funding in the special sales tax that's only streets related, and a little bit in the sales tax economic development fund, but not a huge amount there, so.
Now, was the $1 million in ARPA funds, that was designated more for infill?
housing.
Or,
No, there was
No.
1 million for
For housing.
new housing construction and 1 million for infill.
Yes.
because again, I guess what I'm, in my mind, trying to get our infill projects up and running.
Ms. Pack, what is our current fund balance? You said we have 6.5 excess, is that correct?
The preliminary, now, don't quote me on this, fund balance in the general fund is about $18 million at the end of 2021.
Okay, because we had I think we had set a target balance of 10 million, is that correct?
That's correct. We set a target of $10 million, and we also have committed some of that funding for some of these, through strategic planning last year, we had committed about $2 million to other purposes, whether it was transfers or something like that. So that's where I got the $6 million.
Your 6.5, okay. So that balance has continued to grow. That's good news, so thank you.
Yes. Yep.
And not to be a pessimist, but I'd be very satisfied if we got one grant award. I mean, I've had this conversation with some. I don't know that it'll be exclusively $25 million grant awards, but if they were, that's 4 across the state of Kansas. So, we're kind of trying to identify our priorities, submit competitive applications, and hope for the best. But I would be pleasantly surprised if everything hit on behalf of Salina, and we could fund it all, but that would be a nice problem to have at that point.
Mayor Davis, another question I had was, do they ask us to prioritize these, or is this just you submit the 3 and then they kind of pick and choose?
Yeah, they did not ask for any prioritization
Okay.
in the grant application.
And I guess since we were going to go through them one at a time, I did have a question on the Drever Group. Obviously, they said the maximum is 25 million, so getting the 65 million is probably highly, doubtful. Let's say the state comes back and awards us 10 million, let's say, towards the Drever housing development. How do we proceed as far as with them, as far as, do we go to them and say, okay, what part of the project will you move forward? Do they have an interest in moving forward if we only get 10 million? How does that all work?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of a two-pronged approach. One is, okay, this is what we receive from base. Let's put that into your pro forma, and let's talk about fulfilling the rest of your pro forma. Do we think we can do that in other ways? If that's not the case, then I think we start to have a conversation about, okay, here's what we do have in the way of funding. What can we do, or what can we pull out of your proposed approach to take advantage of the funding that we did receive? And at that point, you're talking about carving out a portion of it or phasing it, but trying to take advantage of whatever funding we do receive.
And there is an additional $731 million that's part of the Spark project, or the Spark process. And so a few weeks ago, we did submit, the first round was really not grant applications, it was more idea submissions. So we did submit some of these ideas, and those committees they actually received around 1,000 or over 1,000 different submittals. But those committees have met, and they have discussed, and actually our name came up in the discussion, because we have went in with kind of a united front. Everybody knows that we have a problem with housing. The governor's office has recognized it. The Spark committee, or the subcommittees, recognized it. Our local delegation has recognized it. So they are all aware of the issues that we're having here. And so that's why I would say, let's not shy away from submitting the 65 million. There's lots of pots of money out there right now, and they will shuffle those around at the state level. Some of it might get political, but we don't know until we submit it what's actually going to happen. But there is more money there. There's 731 additional dollars in the Spark funds. There's also more money in the state coffers from sales tax and other funds than they've had in a really long time. So
And
there are other funding sources.
We're not sure when those funds will be available.
We're not. We're not. I think they anticipate they will talk some more about the Spark in the next month or two. What I anticipate is going to happen is they will segregate money into different pots and say, okay, here's another process that you can apply for it, kind of like they're doing with base. But we don't know what that is, and it changes constantly. I mean, it's just every week we're getting different information and new information.
To Jacob's point, it is.
One other quick question, and then I'll just listen in. Let's say the state comes back and says we'll give you 10 or 20 million grant towards the housing, and they say that's just not going to get it done. Do we have the ability to go back to the state and say that that's not going to fly, but can we use it for Holmes Road and Aeroplanes development?
We certainly, if it comes to that, we'd certainly have that conversation. I can't speak for the state, but to Jacob's prior point, having a recognition of, kind of how acute of a need we have, and that we have multiple options or multiple things identified to try to address our housing need, I'm hopeful that if it came to that, we could have a conversation about, well, can we redirect it for something that will be responsive? But I think our first response would be to continue to coordinate, if it's awarded for Drever, to continue to coordinate with Drever and as much as we could to try to take advantage of what funding is received.
Well, Commissioner Hoppick, to your earlier question regarding timing, Jacob and I have been coordinating on these two programs. So Spark has a longer time period, but it's meant to fund what they call transformational projects. So it's a little different than a typical grant process where it's got this kind of idea submission. And what they're doing is they're looking through, finding the validity of those ideas, seeing if there's other funding sources for those ideas, and then possibly moving those ideas into something else that they're more suited for, or different programs, looking at those different things. And then it goes into the second round where you apply with more details, and possibly a third round. As the schedule goes right now through Spark, they have basically the first week of May as a notification period. And that's if everything they've got in their giant Gantt chart right now goes the way they say it will. Base is meant to be much faster. So, and it's also requiring a higher level of detail. We're submitting timelines, we're submitting bids and quotes and cost estimates, a variety of different things. There's a lot of material going into those applications in addition to these support letters and stuff. And that has a March, I think it's 25th. Yeah, March 25th notification date as far as that award. So it's much faster. So they're kind of different pieces. And as Spark, or basically Base said, here we need you to narrow this down kind of thing, where Spark has a much more open umbrella of ideas. So it's going to take a little bit more to churn through there. But the award could also be much higher through Spark.
Thank you.
You have any questions? One, with, if Holmes Road grant was approved and that infrastructure was put in, is there a risk that those lots that are still not yet developed west of that line that runs just east of Magnolia Home would sit vacant for a while as people would wait to see if it's going to be much cheaper to have a lot east of that line, since there's no special assessment to pay for Holmes Road?
Well, I can't say that that wouldn't happen, given all the feedback we have about the lack of available housing and the sense of urgency. I think the market's going to, continue to move pretty quickly, but individual buyers may hold out. But
The special assessments wouldn't be any different. If Holmes Road goes in with this grant, then the special assessments on those as it moves to the east, those special assessments would be the same as what's already there. So I don't think there would be a situation.
Internal, but I mean, as far as the
Well, what's there doesn't have anything on the perimeter roads right now. I mean, because we haven't done any improvements. So
there'd be an additional assessment for Holmes Road upgrade, correct?
In this approach, this would fund
There would not.
at least the interim
Right, but I
Holmes
mean,
Road
without the
upgrade.
base grant.
Correct, but in terms of a perimeter road approach, we've done a little bit on Cedar Ridge in terms of perimeter road improvements being part of the development. Markley, they did the special assessments that came to you recently, but it was pretty limited in scope. So I don't know that we have any significant perimeter road special assessed projects that would create a large imbalance. We've got the perimeter road policy, but we haven't really
So without this,
utilized it all that much.
once that development east of that line started, then Holmes Road would have to be improved.
Yes, I mean, our standard, our current standard is you cannot develop and access Holmes Road unless it's at least improved to the interim street standard, which is one of the major factors that's held up development on Holmes
Is
Road.
that a, Rick, it's been holding, is that, anybody have just off the top of their head, cost per lot, just for the Holmes Road upgrade?
Yeah, so when we looked at doing, you'd have special assessments. I mean, that's one of the activities we
Right.
kind of played, is if you had a subdivision go in, you're gonna have special assessments, and then you'd have a benefit district on top of that. Could be anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. So, and I think one of the other things that hasn't been mentioned about what is advantageous about us doing homes is particularly water and sewer construction and design. It may be flat, but it's not that flat out there. And trying to get the right elevations, Martha and I have had this conversation numerous times. If you were able to design the whole system really through the whole 3 miles, you're going to get the most optimal system, one that's easiest for us to maintain and one that's designed in the most efficient way rather than piecemealing our way through that. And so there's a real advantage to doing the water and sewer piece. The other advantage to going after the road dollars at this point is, as Jacob pointed out, there are road dollars in other places, but usually those road dollars are for commercial, multimodal, commerce-type roads. So Magnolia is a great one. That's why KDOT was like, hey, kind of head down this road because we've got the airport, we've got industrial uses, all those things. Holmes Road is 100% houses. And there's just not a lot of money out there for that scale of housing roads. And you can see that whole question, as Mike's talking about that perimeter road policy, you can see, I mean, it stops right there on those subdivisions down by Magnolia because they can't make that work to come over and add that additional cost to those homes, and it's just not enough to justify it. And all of them kind of keep looking to each other. We've got developers up at Crawford who are like, until that next piece tips over, and that is really what's stopping anybody from developing out there. And when you look at our housing study, all of the infrastructure is right about there. And if we had to get kind of like the biggest bang for our buck, that is our most dense cluster of potential residential developable properties with all the right characteristics and the utilities just about there. So if we're able to get those, we open up that, I would safely say you've got about 15 years of healthy, normal residential development going at a decent pace. It would keep us going for a while. And what I like is we've got some that are ready to go. This would definitely tip them in the right direction.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation. Any other questions or concerns?
In regards to Holmes Road, what's the county's timeline on improving Simpson? Could those projects kind of be going together?
I don't know that any of us know the answer to that.
That's
question.
why they posted the speed limit at 40 mile an hour on Simpson.
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
All right, any questions, comments?
I guess maybe I could speak to that a little bit. The expectation, by way of our urban service area and our comprehensive plan, as well as our agreement with the county, is urban-level development, city-level development is going to occur to city standards, in the city limits, and the city's going to be expected to maintain the roads that are improved. So the whole plan is strategic, incremental growth of the city in our identified growth area, which is that Holmes corridor at the moment.
I think we need to be looking at that Magnolia Bridge in the future, too.
We have a whole nother list as infrastructure funds come out, and that bridge is on that list.
It was never designed to carry the level of traffic it is today.
It certainly can't be expanded easily. That's something we've looked at before, and cost was a factor. If we can secure some infrastructure funds, that might be a very viable project for that.
Any questions from, or comments from the public?
Any questions?
Or comments, concerns? And just anyone who want to come up and speak?
Sure, I'd just like to say thank you, City Manager.
Give your name to the clerk, please.
I'm sorry, my name is Derek Lee, here on behalf of the Aeroplanes Development. So, thank you, everybody, Mayor, Commission. We appreciate your time and consideration. Any questions about the Aeroplanes Development, or specifically in relation to the base grant? Makes that pretty easy for us then.
I don't think it would hurt to remind the public just kind of the basic price range that that's going to be in.
Absolutely. So we are planning a development that is a total of 330 homes. They're a townhome product. Each is, most at least will be 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, over 1,500 square feet in the moderate income housing price range with no special assessment taxes. And while the base grant is our first priority, we understand that there's a lot of competition for those. Our application certainly fits to the letter what the base grant application says it covers for housing with infrastructure and an economic impact zone, but we do have a backup plan there, of course, if that falls through.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Anyone else? Well, my suggestion, unless the city attorney would advise otherwise, is that we consider this en bloc.
If you wish to
And-
proceed that way, I think we could, I'll defer to Mr. Wood, but he could give you a summary of, in its entirety, what this recommendation would be, if that's helpful.
It would make it easier for the person who has to make the motion, yes,
Okay, so
either side.
if you're comfortable with it, you might word it as what they're authorizing, so they can end up saying, I so move.
Okay. So for the Drever project, we would be asking you to authorize staff to submit a base grant application for the Drever housing development and commit $1 million as a local cash match, and to give the mayor authority to sign a letter of commitment to be included in the application. For the Holmes Road improvement, we would ask you to authorize staff to submit a base grant application for the Holmes Road improvement project and to commit $2.7 million as local match, and to give the mayor authority to sign a letter of commitment to be included in the application. For Aeroplanes development, we would ask that you authorize staff to submit a base grant application for the Aeroplanes housing development with a local match funded by the developer. For the Northside Industrial Park wastewater and rail realignment, we would ask you to commit $1.3 million as a local cash match and authorize the mayor to sign a letter of commitment and support to be included in the Northside Industrial Park wastewater and rail realignment base grant application. And then for university housing, we would ask you to authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support for the university housing project to be included in the base grant application.
Right.
And that's it.
Mayor, I'll take a crack at this. I move that we authorize staff to submit a base grant application for the 5 proposed projects, including the proposed local matches detailed, and give the mayor the authority to sign a letter of commitment to be included in the application.
I'll second that.
As one point of clarification, 3 of those applications would be ours. The North Industrial Park application would be the Salina Community Economic Development Organization, and the University Housing application would be submitted by Salina County. But we then would be applying, endorsing, and committing as we previously described.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the submittal of 5 projects for base grant awards, and with 1 letter of commitment and 1 letter of support. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. And if there is no other business?
I move we adjourn.
There is none on my part.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.